Mira Chen stood outside Celestial Heights, her palms sweating despite the cool autumn breeze. The restaurant towered before her like a glass cathedral, its windows reflecting the golden sunset across the city skyline. Inside, she could see elegantly dressed guests moving like figures in a painting, each one seemingly more confident than the last. She checked her phone again. Her best friend Naomi had sent 3 encouraging messages about tonight's blind date with a lawyer named Christopher. After 2 years of pouring every ounce of energy into her work as a junior architect at Hayes Development Group, Naomi had insisted it was time for Mira to remember what living felt like. The navy dress Mira wore was borrowed. The heels were slightly too tight. And her entire month's savings had gone toward helping her younger brother with college textbooks. This world of crystal chandeliers and prix menus felt impossibly distant from her reality. Taking a breath that did nothing to calm her racing heart, she pushed through the heavy doors. A hostess with perfect posture and a practiced smile greeted her. Mira stammered out her reservation name. The woman gestured toward the dining room with a graceful sweep of her arm. Finding her place, the restaurant interior took her breath away. Candlelight danced across white tablecloths, and soft jazz floated through the air like silk. Couples leaned close in conversation, business people clinked glasses over deals, and servers moved with the precision of ballet dancers. Mira felt like an imposter in a world where she did not belong. She scanned the room for table 14, her eyes adjusting to the dim lighting. Near the window, she spotted a man sitting alone, his profile strong and composed against the backdrop of twinkling city lights. That must be Christopher, she thought. Gathering every ounce of courage she possessed, she wound her way through the tables. "I am so sorry I am late," she said breathlessly as she slid into the chair across from him. "The subway had delays, and I got turned around coming out of the station." The man looked up, and Mira's words died in her throat. He was not what she expected at all. His features were refined but warm, with intelligent green eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations without speaking. Dark hair fell slightly across his forehead, and when he smiled, it transformed his entire face from formal to genuinely welcoming. "No need to apologize," he said, his voice smooth and assured. "These things happen." Something in his tone made her pause. He did not sound like someone who had been waiting nervously for a blind date. He sounded like someone accustomed to complete control. An unexpected beginning before Mira could process this. A server appeared with a bottle of wine. "Mr. Hayes," the server said with deference, "shall I pour for both of you?" Mira froze. Hayes. The name echoed in her mind like a warning bell. Julian Hayes, the CEO whose signature appeared on company-wide emails. The man whose decisions shaped the futures of hundreds of employees, including her own. The face she had only seen in professional magazines and the occasional corporate presentation video. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She should stand up right now, explain the terrible mistake, and find table 14, where Christopher was probably wondering where his date had gone. But Julian's steady gaze held her in place, curiosity flickering in those green eyes. "Please," Julian said to the server, then turned his attention fully to Mira. "I am Julian." He extended his hand across the table. She hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. "Mira," she replied, her voice softer than she intended. His handshake was firm but brief. Professional, yet somehow intimate in the quiet space between them. As the server poured wine into crystal glasses, Mira tried to organize her scattered thoughts. This was wrong on so many levels. He was her boss, several layers of management above her world. She was nobody to him, just one of countless employees whose names he would never know. The conversation begins. "Tell me about yourself." "Mira," Julian said, leaning back slightly with genuine interest in his expression. The question was simple, ordinary even, but coming from him it felt weighted with significance. This was her moment to correct the mistake, to laugh it off and excuse herself. Instead, she found herself answering honestly. "I work in architecture," she said carefully, omitting the fact that it was for his company. "I design sustainable housing solutions, trying to find ways to make beautiful spaces accessible to people who need them most. His eyebrows rose with interest. That sounds meaningful? Most people in this city talk about profit margins and market share. But you talk about accessibility and need, Myra said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. I grew up in a small apartment where my parents raised 3 kids. Space was precious. Beauty felt like a luxury we could not afford. I wanted to change that for other families. Julian nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. My parents had the opposite problem. We had space, but it never felt like home. Just expensive furniture in expensive rooms with expensive expectations. The vulnerability in his admission surprised her. This was not the distant CEO from company presentations. This was a person, complicated and real. Sitting across from her with walls momentarily lowered, deepening connection as their appetizers arrived. The conversation flowed with unexpected ease. Mira told him about her younger siblings, about her mother who still called every morning before work, about the community center where she volunteered teaching kids basic design principles. She did not mention the second job she worked on weekends or the student loans that kept her up at night. Julian shared stories too, though she noticed he chose them carefully. He spoke about the pressure of family legacy, about a grandmother who had actually listened to his dreams before she passed, about feeling perpetually observed and judged. There was loneliness beneath his polished exterior, a kind of isolation that wealth and power could not solve. Do people ever just talk to you? Mira asked suddenly, then immediately regretted her boldness. I mean, without wanting something? Julian paused, his wine glass halfway to his lips. A genuine smile spread across his face, one that reached his eyes and made him look younger. Not in a very long time, he admitted. You are refreshing, Mira. Honest. The word hung between them, and guilt twisted in her stomach. She was not being entirely honest. She was sitting at the wrong table, talking to her CEO under false pretenses. Letting him believe this meeting was intentional, but something about this moment felt too precious to shatter with reality. The buildings stormed their entrees arrived, and the conversation never faltered. They discussed art and architecture, debated the soul of cities versus countryside, laughed over shared experiences of family gatherings gone wrong. Hours dissolved like sugar in water, sweet and unnoticed. Then Julian's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it with a slight frown, and Mira caught a glimpse of the screen. Board meeting notes. Quarterly projections. Merger discussions. The reminder of who he really was crashed over her like a wave. Excuse me one moment, he said, his tone shifting to something more formal as he answered. Yes, the West Side project documents need final review by morning. As he spoke, his entire demeanor changed. The warmth receded behind professionalism. His voice carried authority that could move millions of dollars with a single decision. This was Julian Hayes, the man who controlled her professional world. And she was just Mira Chen Jr., architect. Sitting at the wrong table, when he ended the call and turned back to her, the warmth returned, but Mira could not unsee the truth. She was in dangerous territory, and the longer this continued, the harder the fall would be. I apologize, Julian said with a slight smile. Work has a way of intruding. I understand, Mira replied. Though her hands trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass, Julian studied her for a moment. Act! Something unreadable in his expression. I should confess something, he said quietly. I am supposed to be meeting someone tonight. A blind date my sister arranged. She is late, or perhaps she is not coming at all. Mira's breath caught. The truth hovered on her lips, ready to tumble out and shatter this fragile bubble they had created. But before she could speak, Julian continued. But then you arrived, he said, his gaze intense and unwavering. And I found myself hoping my actual date would not show up. The confession hung in the air between them, vulnerable and dangerous. Mira felt the weight of her own unspoken truth pressing against her chest. Mira's heart raced at Julian's words. She should tell him everything right now. That she was at the wrong table. That she worked for him. That this entire evening was built on a mistake. But the way he looked at her with such genuine interest and vulnerability made the words stick in her throat. Sometimes the unexpected turns out better than the planned, she managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian smiled. A real smile that transformed his features from handsome to captivating. My sister would call that fate. I prefer to think of it as fortunate timing. The waiter returned to clear their plates, and in that brief interruption, Mira's phone vibrated in her purse. She ignored it, knowing it was probably Naomi, wondering where she had disappeared to. Table 14 seemed like another universe now, and Christopher like a character from someone else's story. Sharing dreams. You mentioned sustainable housing earlier, Julian said, leaning forward with his elbows on the table in a gesture that felt remarkably informal for someone of his position. What drives that passion specifically? Mira took a sip of wine, gathering her thoughts. When I was 12, my family almost lost our apartment. My father had been laid off, and we were 3 months behind on rent. I remember my mother crying in the kitchen, trying to figure out how to keep a roof over our heads while still feeding 3 kids. Julian's expression softened. And she saw no pity there, only understanding. A neighbor who was an architect heard about our situation, Mira continued. He designed a small addition to a community building and hired my father to help with construction. It was not much, but it kept us afloat. That architect showed me that design was not just about aesthetics. It could change lives, create opportunities, build futures. That is what you want to do, Julian said, not as a question, but as an acknowledgement. Yes, Mira replied with conviction. I want to design affordable housing that does not look affordable. Spaces where families can feel proud, where kids can dream without their surroundings telling them their dreams are too big. Julian was quiet for a moment, his fingers tracing the stem of his wine glass. My company owns several development projects, he said carefully. Most of them focus on luxury markets because that is where the immediate profit lies. But what you are describing, that vision, it has more value than any quarterly report could measure. Unexpected vulnerability. The conversation shifted as dessert menus appeared. Mira found herself relaxing despite the underlying tension of her secret. She told him about her siblings, about how her brother wanted to be a teacher, and her sister dreamed of opening a bakery. She described Sunday dinners at her parents', small house where everyone talked over each other and laughter filled every corner. That sounds wonderful, Julian said, and there was a wistfulness in his voice that made her chest tighten. Family dinners at my house were business meetings in disguise. My father used them to discuss company strategy, market positioning, competitor analysis. By the time I was 15, I could recite profit margins better than I could tell you anyone's favorite color. What is your favorite color? Mira asked impulsively. Julian blinked, clearly caught off guard by the simple personal question. A slow smile spread across his face. Green, he said. Deep forest green. It reminds me of the one place I felt free as a kid. A summer house upstate surrounded by trees. No business talk allowed. Mine is amber, Mira offered. Like sunset through glass, or the way light hits old photographs. It feels warm and full of stories. The intimacy of the exchange settled between them like a shared secret. Mira realized with startling clarity that she was not just attracted to Julian Hayes the successful CEO. She was drawn to Julian the person, the man who remembered childhood freedom and carried loneliness like a weight on his shoulders. The interruption, their dessert arrived. A shared chocolate creation that neither had ordered, but both welcomed. As Mira lifted her spoon, she caught movement near the entrance. Her stomach dropped. Naomi stood by the hostess stand, her blonde curls unmistakable even from across the restaurant. She was scanning the room with increasing concern. Mira sank lower in her chair, hoping somehow to become invisible. But Naomi's gaze swept methodically through the dining room and inevitably landed on her. Confusion flashed across Naomi's face, quickly followed by shock as she registered who Mira was sitting with. Is something wrong? Julian asked, noticing Mira's sudden tension. Mira began. But Naomi was already making her way toward their table. Her expression a mixture of worry and disbelief. Mira, Naomi said as she reached them, her voice tight with barely contained emotion. What are you doing here? Christopher is still waiting at table 14. He thinks you stood him up. The words hung in the air like an accusation. Mira felt the blood drain from her face as reality came crashing down around the beautiful bubble she had been floating in. Julian's expression shifted subtly, his business acumen clearly processing this new information. Table 14, he repeated slowly. So this was a mistake, Mira finished, her voice barely audible. I sat at the wrong table. Confession. Naomi looked between them, her eyes widening as she fully recognized Julian. Mr. Hayes, she stammered, then turned back to Mira with an expression that clearly said they would be having a very long conversation later. I will just... Christopher is waiting. Give me a moment, Mira said to her friend, then forced herself to meet Julian's gaze. I am so sorry. I should have said something immediately, but I was confused, and then we started talking. And you just let me believe this was intentional, Julian said, his voice carefully neutral. Yes, Mira admitted, shame burning through her. And there is something else. Something I should have told you from the beginning. Julian waited, his green eyes watchful. I work for you, Mira said quietly. At Hayes Development Group. I am a junior architect in the design department. I have been there for 2 years. She watched emotions flicker across his face too quickly to name. Surprise, certainly. Something that might have been disappointment. But then, unexpectedly, the corner of his mouth lifted in a slight smile. Mira Chen, he said thoughtfully. The sustainable housing proposals that came across my desk last month. The community integration designs. Those were yours. Mira blinked in shock. You read those? They barely made it past my department head. I read everything that shows genuine innovation, Julian replied. Your proposals were impressive. Idealistic, perhaps, but brilliant. The choice? Naomi cleared her throat awkwardly. Mira, I really think we should. I need to apologize to Christopher, Mira said, standing on shaking legs. This was unfair to everyone involved. Julian stood as well, his height and presence suddenly overwhelming in the intimate space. Before you go, he said, pulling out his phone, I would like to discuss those housing proposals further. In an official capacity, may I have your contact information? Mira stared at him, trying to read his expression. Was this professional courtesy? Pity? Or something more? I don't want you to feel obligated, she said carefully. Because of tonight? Because of Mira? Julian interrupted gently. I am asking because your work deserves attention. And because, he paused, a vulnerability crossing his features, I would like to see you again. Intentionally this time? If you would like that too? Her heart stuttered. I work for you. That makes things complicated. Complicated does not mean impossible, Julian replied, just more carefully navigated. Naomi was practically vibrating with impatience beside them, but Mira felt frozen in this moment of decision. She thought about Christopher waiting at table 14, about the safe, uncomplicated evening that could have been. Then she looked at Julian, at the man who had shared his loneliness and listened to her dreams with genuine interest. I would like that, she said softly. Then quickly added her phone number to his contacts. Walking away, as Mira followed Naomi toward table 14. She glanced back once. Julian remained standing, watching her leave with an expression she could not quite decipher. Their eyes met across the restaurant, and something unspoken passed between them. A promise, perhaps, or a question. At table 14, Christopher looked up with understandable frustration. He was handsome in a conventional way, with neat hair and a polite smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Mira felt a wave of guilt as she approached. I am so sorry, she began, sliding into the seat across from him. There was a terrible mix-up, and Were you sitting with Julian Hayes? Christopher interrupted, his voice sharp with recognition. I saw you from here. Do you have any idea who that man is? Yes, Mira said quietly. I work for his company. Christopher's expression cycled through several emotions before landing on skeptical disappointment. Right. Well, I suppose I understand the appeal of a billionaire over a junior lawyer. It was not like that, Mira protested weakly. But even to her own ears, the denial sounded hollow. It had been exactly like that, even if she had not planned it. The rest of the dinner with Christopher was painfully awkward. They made stilted conversation about weather and work, both clearly wishing to be elsewhere. When the check came, Christopher insisted on splitting it with an edge of wounded pride. Mira agreed readily, grateful for anything that would end the evening faster. The nights ended outside the restaurant. Naomi exploded with questions the moment Christopher was out of earshot. What just happened in there? Do you realize you just accidentally went on a date with Julian Hayes? Your CEO? Mira, this is insane. I know, Mira said, hugging her coat tighter against the cool night air. I know it is crazy and complicated and probably a terrible idea, but, Naomi prompted, reading her friend's expression. But it felt real, Mira admitted. He listened when I talked about my family, about my work. He shared things that felt honest and vulnerable. For a few hours, we were just two people connecting. Not CEO and employee. Not billionaire and struggling architect. Just Julian and Mira. Naomi studied her friend's face in the glow of the streetlights. You really like him? I barely know him, Mira countered, but her protest was weak. Sometimes that is when connections feel strongest, Naomi said wisely, before reality gets in the way. The question is, what happens now? Mira pulled out her phone and saw a message waiting. Her heart jumped as she opened it. Thank you for an unexpected and memorable evening. I meant what I said about your proposals and about seeing you again. No pressure, no expectations. Just possibility. Julie and she showed the message to Naomi, who whistled softly. Well, he is certainly direct. What should I do? Mira asked, feeling suddenly overwhelmed by the enormity of what had just happened. That depends, Naomi said. Do you want to play it safe and pretend tonight never happened? Or do you want to see where this leads, complications and all? Myra thought about Julian's smile when she told him about her dreams. She thought about the loneliness in his voice when he described family dinners that felt like board meetings. She thought about the way their conversation had flowed, like they had known each other for years instead of hours. I want to see where it leads, she said finally, even if it scares me. Then text him back, Naomi encouraged. But Mira, be careful. Office romances are tricky. Office romances with your CEO, that is playing with fire. I know, Mira replied, already typing her response. But maybe some fires are worth the risk. She hit send on her message. I would like to explore that possibility. Carefully, honestly, and with clear communication about the complications. When would you like to discuss my proposals? The response came almost immediately. How about lunch tomorrow? Somewhere outside the office, somewhere we can talk freely. If you are available, Mira smiled despite her nervousness. I am available. Send me the details. As she rode the subway home that night, Mira replayed every moment of the evening. The accidental meeting, the easy conversation, the revelation, and its aftermath. She knew tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be questions about ethics and optics, about power dynamics and professional boundaries. But tonight, she allowed herself to feel hopeful about the unexpected turn her life had taken. Mira woke the next morning to 17 missed calls and twice as many text messages. News traveled fast, apparently. Her younger sister had heard from someone who knew someone that Mira had been spotted dining with one of the city's most eligible bachelors. Her brother sent a string of questions mixed with protective warnings. Even her mother called, concerned and curious in equal measure. Mama, it was an accident, Mira explained for the third time. Sitting in her tiny kitchen with instant coffee, growing cold in her hands. I sat at the wrong table. Accidents have a way of revealing destiny, her mother replied in Mandarin, her voice warm with ancient wisdom. Your grandmother always said the universe pushes us toward the people we need to meet. But Mira, be careful. Men with that much power, they live in different worlds. I know, Mama, Mira said softly. I am being careful. After hanging up, she stood in front of her closet for 20 minutes, trying to choose an outfit for lunch. Everything looked too casual or too formal, too professional, or too much like she was trying too hard. Finally, she settled on simple black pants and a burgundy blouse. It's professional enough for a business meeting, but soft enough to not look like armor. The office atmosphere at work. The morning felt different. Mira told herself she was imagining the sideways glances from colleagues. the whispered conversations that stopped when she approached the coffee station. But when her department head called her into his office just before noon, reality confirmed her paranoia. "Mira," Thomas began, his expression uncomfortable, "there has been some talk about you having dinner with Mr. Hayes last night." Her stomach dropped. "It was not what people think. I accidentally sat at the wrong table." "We talked. That is all." "That is all," Thomas repeated skeptically. "Look, I am not here to judge your personal life, but you need to understand the optics. A junior architect suddenly getting FaceTime with the CEO? People will make assumptions. They will question whether your work is being evaluated fairly." "My work speaks for itself," Mira said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I know that, and you know that," Thomas replied. "But perception matters. Just be aware that you are under a microscope now." The lunch meeting Mira arrived at the small Italian restaurant 15 minutes early, her nerves making it impossible to sit still at the office. Julian had chosen a place far from the corporate towers, tucked into a quiet neighborhood where business deals did not dominate every conversation. When he arrived exactly on time, he looked different. Still professional, but somehow more approachable in a charcoal sweater instead of his usual formal suit. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the corner booth he had reserved. "I hope the location is comfortable. I thought somewhere away from the office would be better for an honest conversation." "Honest is good," Mira agreed, sliding into the booth. "I think we need that." They ordered quickly, both seeming to understand that food was secondary to the conversation they needed to have. When the server departed, Julian leaned forward, his green eyes serious. "I want to address the elephant in the room," he began. "The professional complications. I spoke with our legal and human resources teams this morning." Myra's heart sank. Of course he had. He was a CEO. He thought through consequences and consulted experts before making decisions. And what did they say? They outlined the policies. No direct reporting relationships between people in a romantic relationship. Full disclosure to HR. Potential recusal from decisions affecting your career advancement. Julian listed, methodically. There are also the unspoken concerns. How people will perceive you. Questions about favoritism. The challenges of maintaining professional boundaries. "So basically, it is complicated exactly as we knew it would be," Mira said, trying to keep disappointment from her voice, as Julian agreed, "but not impossible. If we both want this," the if hung between them weighted with significance. Mira thought about Thomas's warning, about the microscope she was now under. She thought about her career, the projects she wanted to lead, the impact she wanted to make. Getting involved with Julian Hayes could overshadow all of that. Could reduce her to a footnote in gossip rather than an architect building something. It's meaningful. But she also thought about last night. The ease of their conversation. The way he listened when she spoke about her dreams. The vulnerability he showed when discussing his own loneliness. Those moments had felt real in a way that was rare and precious. "Making choices, I need to be honest about something," Mira said carefully. "I am terrified. Not of you, but of what this could cost me. I have worked so hard to be taken seriously, to prove that I belong in rooms where decisions get made. If people think I am using a relationship with you to advance my career, it will destroy everything I have built." Julian nodded slowly. "I understand that fear, and I cannot promise it will not happen. People will talk. They will make assumptions. But Myra, I can promise that your work will always be evaluated on its merit. And I can promise that I will be transparent about recusing myself from any decisions that affect you directly." "That might not be enough," Mira said quietly. "For other people, they will still question everything."
Oh.
"Then we give them nothing to question," Julian replied. "We keep our professional and personal lives completely separate. At work, I am your CEO, and you are a talented architect whose proposals deserve consideration regardless of our personal connection. Outside of work, we explore this connection honestly and carefully. Is that possible?" Mira asked. "To keep those worlds separate?" "I don't know," Julian admitted, "but I would like to try." "If you would too?" Mira studied his face. searching for any sign of the powerful CEO who could make decisions without considering consequences. But she saw only a man willing to navigate complexity for something he believed might be worthwhile. The deeper conversation, their food arrived, but neither paid it much attention. The conversation shifted to deeper territory, exploring the practical realities of what they were considering. "Tell me about your vision," Julian said. "Not just the sustainable housing proposals. The bigger picture. What do you want to achieve?" Mira set down her fork, gathering her thoughts. "I want to change how we think about affordable housing. Right now, low-income housing looks low-income. It is functional, but not beautiful. It is shelter, but not home. I want to design spaces that honor the people living in them, spaces with natural light and community areas and small touches that say you matter. Your life has value. Your dreams are worth supporting." "That requires significant capital," Julian observed. "Most developers care more about return on investment than social impact." "I know," Mira said, frustration creeping into her voice. "That is the wall I keep hitting. My proposals get praised, and then shelved because they are not profitable enough in the short term." Julian was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. What if profit was not the primary metric? What if we measured success differently? "What do you mean?" Mira asked, leaning forward. "Hayes Development Group has the resources to fund projects that might not generate immediate returns, but would create long-term social value," Julian explained. "We could establish a division focused specifically on sustainable, affordable housing. Use profits from luxury developments to subsidize projects that matter." Mira felt her heart race. "You would really consider that?"
"I would more than consider it," Julian said.
"I have been looking for ways to shift our company focus toward more meaningful work. Your proposals gave me a concrete vision of what that could look like. This conversation is showing me how it could work." "The honest risk, but this is exactly what people will say," Mira protested, even as hope bloomed in her chest. "That I am using our personal connection to influence business decisions." "You are not using anything," Julian countered. "Your proposals were on my desk before last night. They were already being considered. What changed is that now I have a clearer understanding of the vision behind them. That is valuable business insight, not personal favoritism." "What if people do not see it that way?" Mira asked. "Then we document everything. We make the business case transparent. We show how these projects align with long-term strategic goals and social responsibility initiatives," Julian said. "We do this right, Mira, with integrity and clear justification." She wanted to believe it could work. She wanted to trust that good intentions and careful planning would be enough. But life had taught her that the world was not always fair, especially two women trying to succeed in male-dominated fields. "I need time," she said finally, "to think about this, both the personal relationship and the professional opportunity. They are so tangled together now." "They don't have to be," Julian insisted. "The housing initiative moves forward regardless of what happens between us personally. Your work deserves that chance." "But you see how that makes it harder?" Mira said, her voice rising with emotion. "If I say no to exploring a relationship, does the professional opportunity disappear? If I say yes, am I doing it partly because I want the chance to build something meaningful? How do I separate what I want personally from what I want professionally?" Julian reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. "By being honest about both, Mira. I want to see where this connection leads, but I also genuinely believe your work could transform how my company approaches development. Both things can be true. Both things can be important." The turning point, Mira closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She thought about her family, about her siblings counting on her to succeed. She thought about her dreams of designing spaces that mattered. She thought about the loneliness she had seen in Julian's eyes last night. The recognition of someone else who understood what it meant to work hard and still feel somehow isolated from real connection. "Okay," she said, opening her eyes to meet his gaze. "Here is what I need. I need the housing initiative proposal in writing with clear metrics and timelines that have nothing to do with our personal relationship. I need that first before we explore anything else. Julian nodded. Done. I will have my team prepare a comprehensive proposal. You will review it and make recommendations. We will present it to the board, based entirely on business merit. And personally, Mira asked, her voice softer. Personally, I would like to take you to dinner. A real date, not an accident. Somewhere we can continue the conversation we started last night. No pressure about the future, just seeing if this connection we both felt was real or just the novelty of an unexpected meeting. When Mira asked, this weekend, Julian suggested, it gives us time to get the professional framework in place first. It shows we are serious about keeping those boundaries clear. Myra found herself smiling despite her nervousness. You really have thought this through? I don't take risks without considering consequences, Julian said. But sometimes the consequences of not taking a risk are worse than any complications. New beginnings. They finished their lunch with lighter conversation, carefully navigating back to safer topics. They discussed architecture and city planning, shared book recommendations, discovered a mutual love of old jazz. The ease from last night returned, confirming that their connection had not been just the magic of an accidental moment. As they stood to leave, Julian said quietly, "Thank you for being willing to try. I know you are taking a bigger risk than I am. That does not escape me." We are both taking risks, Mira replied, just different kinds. Walking back toward her office, Mira felt a strange mixture of excitement and terror. She had just agreed to potentially change both her professional and personal life in ways she could not fully predict. But she had also refused to let fear keep her from something that might be extraordinary. Her phone buzzed with a message from Naomi. So, how did lunch go? Myra smiled as she typed her response. I think I just said yes to something wonderful and terrifying. No idea if it will work, but I am going to find out. Naomi's response was immediate. That is all any of us can do. Brave, my friend, I am here if you need me. The path forward the next few days passed in a blur of activity. Julian's team reached out about scheduling meetings to discuss the Sustainable Housing Initiative. Mira prepared comprehensive documentation of her proposals, expanding them with detailed cost analysis and long-term impact projections. She worked late into each night, driven by the possibility that her dreams might actually become reality. At the office, she kept her head down and her work exceptional. Thomas continued to give her skeptical looks, but he could not argue with the quality of her designs. Slowly, Mira began to understand that she would have to prove herself over and over, that the connection with Julian would always be therein, the background coloring how people saw her. But she also realized she could live with that, because the work mattered more than people's opinions. Because the chance to create something meaningful outweighed the discomfort of gossip. Because sometimes life offered opportunities that required courage to accept. On Friday evening, Julian sent her the address of the restaurant for their dinner the next night. Unlike Celestial Heights, this was a small neighborhood place known for incredible food and intimate atmosphere, a place where they could talk without being on display. Mira stood in her apartment, looking at the address on her phone, and felt ready to see where this connection led. Ready to build something meaningful professionally. Risks with open eyes and honest intentions. She sent him a simple response. I will be there. At the right table this time. His reply made her smile. I am counting on it. Though I have to admit I am grateful for wrong tables. Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we did not plan. As the sun set over the city, painting her small apartment in shades of amber, Mira felt something shift inside her. The fear was still there, but it no longer paralyzed her. She was stepping into unknown territory, both personally and professionally. She was doing it with intention and courage. The wrong table had led her to an unexpected place. Now it was time to see where the right choices would take her.